Well, we're having a proper spring day this Sunday. Look at that sun. Had a bit of a move round and got the carriage up to working height. So that's the support, which is adjusted by that through there, pair of pinion gears, and it's a telescopic screw, and that raises and lowers the carriage on the front column. And what I need to do is basically take it all apart. We've got that stay which is sat along the XYZ, pick the one that you want, for moving the thing left and right. So I can't flip it over and look at it on the other side because that's in the way. So first job is basically going to be, I think it's undoing these two, winding the lead screw out that way. That should release that section, that casting. The retaining plates is off. I think once the screw's out, I think that thing should lift off then, which is the top end of this. That should lift off, and then I can flip it around, and obviously that stay will be out, and I can start cleaning it down. I'll take the other one out while I'm at it, give it all a good clean down, strip the paint off. I'm going to check some of the bearing surfaces. So these I'm not expecting a lot of wear on, for the simple reason, on the front of the shaper, which is currently in its bed, you can see pretty much all of the flaking. I don't know whether it's original or not, but you can see it's glinting quite well. I lightly stoned it. So I'm not expecting a great deal of wear on these, but I am expecting wear on the opposite face to the top end, which is the movement that way, which is the one that basically takes all the hammer of the carriage. So I've got to get it all stripped down, cleaned up, start off with my straight edge and a feeler gauge, and see what we find. I've had the ram pretty much all sorted. I've not put it back together properly as yet. The ways are all scraped up now. I've added an oil port there and one on the other side with the appropriate feed channels. Just got to decide what kind of connection I'm going to put on here. There was nothing on it when I got it, but the remnants of a couple of brass bits on the fixed side. Nothing in the gib. On my later Elliot, are these little button oilers, which function quite well. You never really know how much oil we've got in. What I'd like are the little oil pots with a flip lid. I've got some, fit them in. The only concern I've got if there's anything on the side of the ram which might come into contact, and I know on this side there's a piece comes down which traverses, so I've just got to make sure if I do fit those cup oilers that they're clear and all that. So at least then you can see the oil going down, so you know it's feeding in. And there we go. Well, you'll have to forgive me, I've not videoed pulling it apart to this point. The first job was to take that lead screw out, which is the left-right adjustment, 2 nuts off the end, then a spacing collar, and then wind it out, and it goes out through the side of the handle. Next job was to remove the screw that fits to, which is located through the hole in the middle of the cap head, and then it's got 3 jacking screws which pick up. You can see the witness marks. Complicated casting on the back face of that. Next job, knock out the taper pin holding that bevel gear, extract that shaft out that way, undo the nuts on that bevel gear and extract the jack out of that way, making mental note as to where all the bits that go ping, cling, cling, ping onto the floor, where they all bounce off to. And then we can start degreasing it all and then have a look, see where we're at. It is pretty chilly today. Sun's been out this morning, but we had snow last night, albeit a sprinkling. So the workshop's well chilly. So that's the drive gear for the rise and fall. Taper pin. It runs on a probably phosphor bronze or a bronze bush with an oil drip, oil point. Knock taper pin out, and then the shaft will actually tap through or pull through. It's quite stiff, so there's obviously a bit of crap that wants cleaning out. Once that's out, nut off the end of this shaft. Then there's a washer, and then screwdriver behind the gear, and it levers off. Once it starts, it's pretty easy, but it's got a drive pin or drive key. It's probably a proper name for that. It was the second one of those I found on taking this apart. It's not a key, but it's a form of the key, but it's circular. It's probably a cheaper way of doing it, I guess. And then that lot all comes out. There's your thrust bearing, which takes the load. So I'll put these bits back on each shaft, and then I can clean them up without losing any parts. And that's it, apart from the sub assemblies. Right, so we've done the initial degrease, taking all the parts in turn. That's the main carriage. It feels much smoother in areas than others, so there's some wear. Top side of it, you can just hear the tooling mark. You won't pick it up on the phone, but there's obviously rust areas here and there. Not so much on the bottom. Picking it up, that's a bit of a mess. I want to try and get my straight edge on it and just see what I've got in terms of wear. The rear, I don't know what you call this, but the carrier for the box, so I guess it's the saddle. This lower face has got a very clear wear mark. So it's worn, and it weighs a bloody ton. So you've got scrape marks through the middle of it, and then wear in that area, and wear in that area. So I'm assuming that these scrape marks were all the way across. So that wants sorting, and obviously I think that's got to be in the same plane as the face, the boxway underneath there. So what I'll do is, that'll be the first section that gets cleaned up, so that face is flat and true 90 to that. So I've got to come up with a way of getting something to start from, then check the wear on that face and make sure it's not worn, bowed or whatever. I'm undecided as to yet whether to clamp it all back onto the column, set it all on and take some measurements, but my gut feel says if they're meant to be a straight plane and they're not, then bring them back to a straight plane. The wear doesn't seem to be excessive to the point of I haven't got a datum to work from, so I'll have a closer look at them now I've got them cleaned up, and then bring you back when I've got a plan. We've been using the cobbled together measuring jig. As you're looking at the front of the machine, this would be the left hand side of the carriage, so it's the side where the operational levers are. So taking the distance across from here is 0, half a thou, 1.4, 1.7, 1.82. That's the wear in terms of thou off. And then it climbs back up 1, 1.3. Bit of variation there which I'm putting down to the rusty end. So we're looking at somewhere in the region of thou and a half in terms of that dimension. Now, of course, what effect that would have on the cut is it would allow the carriage would, if you like, be dropping away if you started at this extreme, so the cut would get shallower and then start to get deeper, which is exactly what I want to try and avoid. So next job is to get it up on the surface plate, mounted on the 2 machine faces which mount to the column, sticking on a pair of parallels, and then check these flat faces, see how they look, and see if I can try and map that out. And then it's going to be a case of probably scraping that face using the straight edge till it's parallel with this dovetail edge here. The dovetail, well, when I've looked at the machining faces, there doesn't seem to be any noticeable wear on it, and given the way that it's actually held in, it's only got like a keeper plate clamped across a diagonal face which is there, so there's not a great deal of, the only wear you're going to get is when crap gets stuck under there. So that's the working weight carrying face, if you like. Well, that's my understanding of it. Anyway, we'll get things cleaned down and get the metrology department opened up. Well, we're not working with a lot of real estate on the granite front, but it's now sat face down on the face of the carriage, and I've run a 10th gauge over the machined ways which clamp to the column, and it's all within plus or minus 2/10 as best I can measure, which stacks up. I mean, the scoring on there is obviously when it's been cranked up and down with the chipping. I've stoned it off, but you can still see the original machine marks. So I'm reasonably happy that they're a good datum to work from. So I've shifted out of the way, clean up with parallels, flip it over and do it all again. Right, so we've got a pair of machine parallels underneath, sat on the surfaces we've just verified. And now we're looking to see if there's wear across this face or t'other face. Before I do any more, I've spent weeks cocking about trying to get a DTI that will fit onto a scribe base, because that's what I've seen on YouTube. And every combination of bloody holders and spikes and all the rest of it, all different sizes, and I should have just made one, but it seems daft trying to reinvent the wheel. Anyway, finally come up with a combination which I'm happy with. Nice little verdict needle dial, which is measuring in tenths. It's a T3 on a stub shaft which clamps onto the dovetail, sorry, screws into the top of the gauge, and then it fits straight into an eclipse holder, which was the same eclipse holder provided to me by one of my viewers, which I was dead chuffed about. Now, of course, I've got a fine adjust, so I can, what I found on previous measuring up, give yourself a point and make sure you zero to that point, and then whenever you move off, you can go back and you can check that your zero is still good, that you've not bumped anything. Stan Zakowski, Haddon, HNW or something. I'll try and put a link on the video below, but watching him, he's very methodical, very clean, without being overly anal, which is handy. It's this sort of stuff you can't learn without looking at others and seeing what they do and then trying it yourself. Anyway, cutting to the chase. Yes, we've got glare, but I've got plus or minus half a thou. Well, plus or minus 0.8 actually. So I'm going to probably, I mean, I can still see this machine, less so in this section, but you can still see the machining marks. And there, you can just pick them out. It's been milled, fly cut almost, but anyway, it's been milled. So check that face. I'm going to move scoot the DTI around and check the other one. But I think I might get away. I could get away without scraping it. Obviously, this edge definitely needs doing. This edge, I think I might get away without it. But I'll weigh it up once I've measured the other face. So, based on all the measurements, I think the maximum deviation, I've got a plus a thou there, going down to nothing, and then going down to 0.8 of a thou, so 8/10. So that's 1.8 thou from there to there, back up to 0. And I've got pretty much the same reading on the blue here. These are 0.6 of a thou, so 6/10. These two ends, which are the free side, so the opposite side to the operator, they show the highest points, but they're also the most rusty. And I have stoned them off, but yeah, they're coming in around about a thou higher than the opposite side. So, cup of tea, bite to eat, and then take a decision as to whether it wants scraping. I'll be honest with you, I'm not convinced it's going to make a huge deal of difference scraping it. I just don't see that making enough difference. Yes, it's got some wear. I mean, you can just feel it's slightly smoother. You can't feel the machine marks, but 0.8 of a thou versus my guess about a week to scrape it flat and true, because I've got to scrape it so that when it sits back on air, it's less deviation than that, you know, 2 to 3/10, and it just takes time. So yeah, my gut feel says leave it, but I need to measure the other piece it mates to it, because that seems to be the bit that's got the most wear. It's never been flaked, never been scraped, never been flaked, so I'm guessing a working machining tolerance of plus or minus half a thou, which leaves me to sort of 4 points. I've got up maximum of half a thou's worth of wear. Not exactly excessive. So just stoning off the saddle. I don't know. Anyway, it's the part that the box fits to. So that's the box. That's the face that the box bolts to. These are the 3 adjusting screws for the lead screw nut and the retaining cap head hole. I don't know whether you can see it, but somebody's give that a good raunch, and that's got a crack there, and it comes down this side, taking that off. So I'll have to do some kind of repair on that. I'll probably just put a cap head in, counter sunk on this, or counter board on this face going in. Don't know yet. First job's to get it up. So I've stoned it off. You can see the various dinks from people chucking stuff into the box, spanners and whatever. Stoned it off, and now I'll get it up on the plate, sitting on that face. Probably I want to sit it on a pair of parallels, because this face is a bit snotty. And then measure up the face that mates with those two. So this is the box saddle. I've got it sat on the same machine parallels. You can see this, I don't know whether scraping or flaking, or there's some marking there, and then it fades out towards the sides. Now my parallels are plus or minus 2/10, and I've got a total variation including that of something like 4/10. So I think that between the two there's probably 1/3 of a thou wear, so I might just scrape that off just to give it a better bearing surface. That's the same, that face, but that's the one I want to try and get at now. So I've got to come up with a cunning plan, because access to it's a pain in the ass. So I'll see you in a minute. Well, I've swapped gauges again. Only one I've got small enough to 1/2 thou per small division. I'm running it down along the box way. I've got 1/2 thou wear there to there and the same that way. So basically the two sides are low and the middle's humped. So my view is that wants scraping flat to stop the thing seesawing as it's going across the ways. That's straight edge I found a while back, which is it's been scraped, so it fits. So that's what we'll be using. I'm just slightly pissed because pissing about getting this thing balanced on the parallels. The bloody thing toppled over and took a couple of chunks out my table. I think the neighbours heard the exclamation. I know the dog ran off. Still, there we go. So yeah, there's some scraping down that way and then some scraping along its mating surface. I can't find significant wear on that face or that face, which are the ones that butt up against that, so I'm not going to bother doing anything with those. I might flake them when I work out what the hell, or how the hell I flake, and that's it. So we'll get on with it now. First print after initial 3 passes with a scraper. Fortunately it shows what we found when we measured it, which was high at the rusty ends and low in the middle. So we'll work our way through this and bring it down to flat, and then we'll re-verify the measurement between that face and the underside of the dovetail to make sure we're parallel, because we don't want it tightening up at one end or t'other. It was slightly out of square from there to there, measuring with 3 different squares, all of which are verified are accurate, but following the recent history with my Mitutoyo, I don't trust anything just at the minute. Probably only a couple of, well, probably only 1 degree or so, but it was enough to see daylight, so I guess that's wear rather than machined wrong. So we'll bring it back to square, because it's makes sense that it would be. I've no means of measuring how square that angle is on the mating piece, so we'll be probably try and print it, in which case we're pissing around with that. Hey ho. This is after, I don't know, hour and a half. So I'm going to break up those by taking off the high spots which are surrounded with blue. Get a slightly better distribution. You can see this, you know, there are areas, but given how slow this thing indexes, and it's only moving then stops, then moving then stops, it ain't going to need 20 points per inch, so I'm thinking somewhere 10 to 15, which is probably not far off now. We'll break them up and bring it down a little bit better, and then for piss about trying to get all the dots there. I'll just check the dimensions of it evened up. I mean, it's flat now. It's a case of is it parallel with the other edge? Should be. We'll see. Well, as I said, I'll get it so I'm getting a flat surface, and then I'll measure it. So I'm measuring across the dovetail to the flat face. Starting point was 0 at this end, and I'm gaining 1.7 thou, which is near as damn it where I started up, and I was 1.8 thou. So I've got a flat face, but it's 1.8 thou wider, or 1.7 thou wider here than it is at that end. So the next question is, where do you take it from? Do I take it off the dovetail and make that then parallel to that, or do I take it off the top face? And the problem is, these things have that surface along the top edge has got to be at 90 degrees to that, in order that when the carriage is moving left right, it's not going downhill or uphill. Now there's a couple of things I need to verify, but when I looked at the, if you like, the original machining marks on the dovetail, you can, if it'll bloody well focus, you can just see the machining lines, yeah, and they're even. Come on, they're even. You still pick them up in this top corner here, and they're even all the way along. So there is, I mean, other than a witness mark, there's minimum wear there, to the best of my knowledge. So if that is an original machine surface, and I haven't touched these, is that 90 degrees to these, or was that cut on the piss in the first place? So the next question is, how the hell do you check it? Gonna go and scratch my head now, and it's dinner time and the kids are going to want feeding. I need to verify which is the square face. I mean, my gut feel says this dovetail, being original, is at 90 degrees to that, but I've learned don't assume anything, so I've got to try and think of a way to measure that. Yeah. Well, we've measured the gap from the across the ways, and we're somewhere in the region of, we've got 1.5 thou, give or take 2/10, wider at one end than the other. There's a few humps and bumps down it. Now I'm getting a good print on the flat face, and the bumps are 1/4 thou, which could be just my scrape marks. Anyway, I flipped it over and I thought I'd print the dovetail. So got no ink at the ends, heavy through the middle, no ink at the other end. So we know that it's got a hump in it now, which stacks up with some of what I found. Also, bearing in mind that it's that face that runs across it with a strip clamped over. There's wear on the strip, and the wear on the face in there that we found was high in the middle and wore either end. So I think what happens is, as that carriage, albeit on the other face of this, is moving along, I think it does that. Now whether it does it all the way along, or it's just when it starts off or changes direction, it's doing that. So I'd expect a higher spot in the middle, lower spots either side. So I'm gonna try to maintain the angle and scrape this back to a flat plane. Try and keep the ends as original, because they do look, and get a focus on it, you can still see the fine material marks there. Sorry, not machining marks. Looks like the side of a file. and there's less of it in the middle. I mean, you're not talking much, but it doesn't need to be. And the same on that end. So I'm going to try and keep the ends as being my register and drop it down. So I would expect there to be a sort of slight rise at this end. Anyway, I was going to say something else then, forgotten. Brain dead. One thing of note, the only facility for a gib is on the width of that. There's nothing on the vertical face, and then the distance between that face and the clamped face of that, there's no facility for a gib on that. So it's a case of scraping that face and that face down to reduce the gap. It's not just a case of tweaking the gib up a bit. Now, given how a shaper works, and lying in bed last night, I stared at the ceiling wondering about it. It's a single point cut, moving in the same plane, or one would hope so after all the work. And the carriage moves the workpiece underneath that single point. So if the carriage is dropping away like that, the height between the tool and the carriage top is going to be the same at the point at which the tool's crossing. So even if this way on the new machine is slightly on the piss, it shouldn't affect the actual outcome of the work until you start doing compound angles and the likes. And the majority of the work that I'll be doing will be flat. But we'll try and get it within the tolerances, and if I can find the reference detail, which went up on Practical Machinist forum, I'll put a link to it if I can't include the actual image. It gives you all the working tolerances, setup tolerances for orientation between the machine column, these ways, the box. It's a handy bit of measurement. Well, it's a handy set of dimensions. I dare say I'll be cursing them by the time I've finished. I'm making use of the jig that I made up for holding the ram. It's proving very handy. And as a thing I once read when I was reading up about cabinet making and woodworking, if you can hold a thing, you can work on it. If you're going to use hand tools, it's hard to use hand tools and not be able to hold the workpiece. So the plan is to scrape out the hump until we're slightly hollow, and then just keep bringing it back until we're touching either end and got a reasonable print down there. Bring you back when we get some progress. This is the underside of the carriage. Well, that's a couple of cycles, so we've got a scrape mark all the way along, excluding the last quarter of an inch. Still humpy in the middle, but I've got to start scraping that out now from the middle out. Not step scraping as such, but that's the nearest, damn it. Just had a comment on the latest video, which I think's 10.6, where I'm talking about all the rest of the main body casting, dovetail scraping, that lot in. I don't know what the comment is because I've not had a chance to read it yet. I've just got the ping in on my phone, but it's from a chap who's currently scraping in a Cincinnati shaper somewhere in the world. That's one thing I love about YouTube. Somewhere somebody else in the world is doing what I'm doing, maybe not at this exact time, but when they get up in the morning or get back from work, that's what they're up to. And it's great being able to share that experience, knowledge and cock-ups. Not that we do many of those. Anyway, I thought I'd bring that one in. So a couple of hours of scraping, and hopefully will I get this to giving us a reasonable flat print. Well, in between phone calls and various distractions, That's about an hour's worth. It's now hinging here and here, so that's fairly flat there. So it's just a case of taking that down now, bringing in that end, and bringing in that end. Another half an hour should see it done, reassuringly. Well, I'm out of time. I should clear my throat before a video. I'm out of time. I've done my hour. I've spread it across. A relatively even print. I'm just taking down the last bits here, bring it all down. The keeper, which is what runs on it, is there. You can see the witness line, so it's only actually over about that much. So I might make a new keeper and just make it a little bit longer, so it's sort of twice the overhang. I don't think it needs it, but I'll feel better. So you can see clearly it's hard here, hard on here. So if I scrape down the grey spots and do another print, I should get better coverage. What can we say? I'm going to call that done. It's a flat plane. I mean, it ain't the best, but it's not actually I think it's a clearance surface. There's a bit of a hole there, but big deal. But then you bear in mind that it's that thing that's moving along, and it moves a maximum, I think it's 200 thou, then stops. I think that's perfectly adequate, and it'll give me a good base from which to measure to the other side. So I'll clean the ink off. I've deburred it. Might do a bit more on that corner just to break that edge a bit. Flip it over and check my measurements, because I haven't taken anything off the end. I don't know, you can just about see them. And then up to the other end. So those edges are still original, as near as damn it. There'll be a couple of tenths in it, but according to the spec, this white, the other end of this weight has got to be within 0.03 of a millimetre per 300 mil. So that's about like 1.5 thou per foot. Well, I've certainly not took off that amount, so we'll see how it looks. Well, we've scraped the angle way, we've touched up the flat top box way, and I've got the jig on measuring it. Now, bearing in mind I'm getting a pretty good print all the way along on both to the best of my ability, with it, ruling out the variation as a result of the scrape marks, I'm pretty damn parallel all the way along until here, and then this last 4 inches or so I've got a thou variation. So if I'm around about there, it starts climbing. There's nothing noticeable. I mean, I've actually left, excuse the fingers, I've left a print mark on. It's definitely slightly heavier here, so I think it still needs a bit of work. The angled way's as good as I can get it. It's certainly the more complicated one of getting a print on, not least because I'm holding everything at an angle and trying to get that so that it's horizontal, so that when I balance the straight edge on I can get it to hinge, and it's hinging okay, albeit it ain't easy to get it to hinge well. So I mean, we know we're within a third of a, plus or minus 1/3 of a thou all the way across, which is basically the depth of the scrapes. It's just this last bit, so I'm going to take another look at this end on each side and see where we're at. Then today's conundrum, we'll just remove my measuring device. Put it down over here. It being a boxway, and that's the face the gib runs on, so I'm gonna stick a micrometer over it and just check, but I'm pretty sure that'll want some kind of scraping on it. And if you don't mind standing on your head, how the hell do you get in there? It's going to be the same problem when I come to scrape down there. If you've got to go in at 45 degrees, you can't, obviously got no access from this side. I've got access from each end, but not a lot, so that's going to take some serious head scratching to work out how I get something along the lines of a scrape line through there. Reading back through the thread on Practical Machinist, which I started up a month or so back, one of the notes said they'd got wear on this section, so they put in a oil line and cavity. So I'll probably look to do that, just in case of working out where's the best place to put the feed point. I mean, it'd be nice to put it in from one side, but that's a lot of drilling out. So I'm gonna have a think, see what to do about that one. So yeah, slowly coming in, but as I say, just this last 4 inches, and it has to be my crappy print technique. But I'm surprised it's that much. I mean, it's half a thou each side, or it can't be a thou on the one side because I'm getting a good print all the way along. So I don't know. Anyway, that's where we're at.